Your baby is not manipulating you, and what's actually happening inside their tiny body when they cry will completely change the way you see them forever. You've heard it before, maybe from a neighbor, a relative, maybe even from someone you trusted. Don't pick them up every time they cry. They'll learn to use it against you. You're teaching them that crying gets them what they want. And maybe in a moment of exhaustion, you almost believed it. You stood at the door of the nursery, hands shaking a little, heart pulling hard in two directions, because part of you wanted so desperately to go to them. But another voice said, if you do, you're letting them win. That voice was wrong. Not slightly wrong, completely, scientifically, neurologically wrong. And today, we're going to take that voice apart piece by piece, because your baby deserves for you to know the truth, and so do you. Let's talk about what's really happening. Picture this. It's 11 o'clock at night. You've fed your baby, changed them, checked their temperature, rocked them, sung to them, and they are still crying, not a soft whimper. A full, red-faced, body-shaking cry. You've done everything right. So now what? This is the moment when the manipulation myth feels most real, because there seems to be no logical reason left. You've solved every problem you can see, and still the crying continues. And your brain, exhausted, desperate, looking for a pattern, lands on, they're doing this on purpose. They want something from me, and they won't stop until they get it. It feels rational. But here is what that explanation requires in order to be true. It requires that your baby who cannot walk, cannot hold their own head up without support, who cannot form a single word or understand the concept of yesterday or tomorrow, possesses the ability to recognize your emotional state, calculate that crying is an effective strategy to alter your behavior, form a deliberate intention to deploy that strategy, and then sustain it over time to achieve a desired outcome. That is not a baby. That is a psychologist. And your baby, as brilliant as they are, is not a psychologist yet. Here is the science that settles this completely. The part of the human brain responsible for strategic, intentional thinking, for planning, for deception, for manipulation, is called the prefrontal cortex. It sits at the very front of the brain, just behind your forehead, and it is the last region to fully develop. Research from developmental neuroscience, including work published by the Harvard Center on the Developing Child, has shown that the prefrontal cortex does not reach functional maturity until a person is in their mid-20s. In infancy, in the first weeks and months of life, the prefrontal cortex is almost entirely offline. It has not yet built the neural connections it needs to support intentional, goal-directed social manipulation. Your baby's brain literally cannot do what the manipulation myth accuses it of. What your baby does have, and what is working at full capacity from the moment they are born, is the limbic system. The limbic system is the brain's emotional core. It processes fear, distress, comfort, and connection. And when a baby cries, the limbic system is the driver, not strategy, not intention. Pure, unfiltered emotional signal. Dr. Darcia Narvaez, professor of psychology at the University of Notre Dame and a leading researcher in early childhood development and evolved developmental niche theory, has described infant crying as a biological alarm system, not a social tactic. It is the body's way of broadcasting that a need is unmet, that the internal state has become dysregulated, that something in the environment or inside the body has moved outside the window of safety. The cry does not ask, "Will this work on my caregiver?" The cry simply says, "Something is wrong. I cannot fix it alone." And this is not a choice. When a baby cries, Their body is producing cortisol, the primary stress hormone. Research by Dr. Wendy Middlemiss at the University of North Texas found that when babies are left to cry without a response from their caregiver, cortisol levels in the infant's bloodstream spike sharply and remain elevated even after the crying stops outwardly. In other words, and this is the finding that changes everything, a baby can stop crying without being okay. The cortisol is still flooding their system. The distress has not resolved. It has simply exceeded their capacity to signal it. This is what happens when the manipulation theory takes hold and a parent stops responding. The baby doesn't learn that crying is useless. The baby's nervous system learns something far darker, that the world does not respond when it is in pain. And that lesson, written in the body at the neurological level, not the intellectual one, shapes the architecture of the developing brain in ways that can be measured years later in stress reactivity, emotional regulation capacity, and attachment security. Now let's talk about mirror neurons. In the early 1990s, neuroscientist Giacomo Rizzolatti and his team at the University of Parma, Italy, discovered a class of brain cells that fire both when an animal performs an action and when it observes the same action being performed by another. These became known as mirror neurons, and their discovery fundamentally changed how scientists understood learning, empathy, and social bonding. In human infants, the mirror neuron system is one of the earliest functional networks in the brain. Your baby watches your face, and their brain begins to map your emotional state onto their own nervous system. When you are calm, the mirror neuron activity in your baby's brain begins to replicate that calm. Their heart rate slows, their breathing softens, their cortisol drops. When you are stressed, the same mirroring happens in reverse. Their body registers your tension before their eyes even fully process your expression. This is not manipulation. This is biology. Your baby is not calculating how to use your emotions. They are completely, helplessly wired to resonate with them. When they reach for you, when they cry in your direction, when they settle the moment your hands make contact with their back, every single one of those responses is a neurological event, not a social strategy. There is a concept in infant psychology called co-regulation, and it sits at the center of everything we are discussing. Co-regulation refers to the process by which a caregiver's calm, regulated nervous system literally regulates the nervous system of the baby. Babies are born without the neurological infrastructure to self-regulate. Their prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for executive control, including emotional self-regulation, is not operational. They cannot soothe themselves, not because they are being stubborn, but because the brain circuitry that self-soothing requires does not yet exist. What they have instead is you. When you respond to their cry, when you pick them up, when you speak in a low, calm voice, when you make skin-to-skin contact, you are not rewarding bad behavior. You are functioning as an external prefrontal cortex. You are lending them the regulatory capacity they will spend years building on their own. And each time you do it, each time their distress is met with a warm, reliable response, a small amount of scaffolding is placed into the developing architecture of their brain. The neural pathways associated with trust, safety, and emotional regulation are reinforced. Over thousands of these moments, thousands of cries answered, thousands of distresses soothed the baby, builds the internal resources that will eventually allow them to self-regulate as a toddler, as a child, and ultimately as an adult. The manipulation myth, if believed and acted upon, interrupts this process at its most critical stage, not because picking up a baby spoils them, but because the absence of a reliable response teaches a dysregulated nervous system that regulation is not available, and the brain reorganizes itself around that fact. Research on attachment theory, built on the foundational work of John Bowlby and expanded by Mary Ainsworth's landmark strange situation studies in the 1970s, consistently shows that infants whose cries are responded to promptly and sensitively in the first year of life develop what is classified as secure attachment. Securely attached children at age 1 are more likely to explore their environment independently, recover more quickly from distress, and show greater social competence and emotional flexibility in preschool and early school years. The babies who were spoiled by being picked up too much are, in study after study, the ones who cry less and self-soothe sooner, not more, and later. This is the opposite of what the manipulation myth predicts. And here is the deepest layer of this. Your baby is not just crying at you, they are crying toward you. There is a difference, and it matters. To cry at someone is to make them a target. To cry towards someone is to make them an anchor, the fixed point in a world that is overwhelming and incomprehensible, and, at 2 months old, entirely beyond your ability to navigate alone. When your baby cries and turns their head in your direction, when their cry changes in pitch the moment they hear your footsteps, when they stop even mid-wail the instant your face comes into view, they are not displaying a tactic. They are displaying trust. They have learned, through nothing more than repeated experience, that you are the thing in this world that makes the unbearable bearable. That is not manipulation. That is love in its most primal, inarticulate, neurologically honest form. Now, a gentle word for parents who are in the thick of it. If there are moments when you feel yourself pulling back, when the voice that says, "Don't go to them too fast," starts to win, that is not a character flaw. That voice comes from somewhere. It comes from generations of parenting advice, rooted in a fear of dependency, in a culture that prized self-sufficiency over connection and mistook emotional need for weakness. You inherited that voice. It was handed to you with the best intentions by people who were handed it themselves, but you can put it down now, because your baby has no agenda. They have only need, urgent, honest, biological need, and you, and only you, are the answer to it. If you find that your baby's crying patterns have changed significantly, if they seem unusually unresponsive, if cries are suddenly very weak or very high-pitched, or if you notice that your baby rarely cries, even in situations that would typically cause distress, it is always worth bringing that observation to your pediatrician. Not every cry means everything is fine, and not every quiet means everything is fine either. Your instincts as a parent are a real and valuable signal. Trust them, and when something feels off, get it checked. Now tell me something. Has someone in your life ever told you that you were spoiling your baby? That you should let them cry it out? Drop that story in the comments below, because you are not alone in having heard it. And the more we share what we now know, the more we can change what the next generation of parents believes before they even hold their baby for the first time. Follow this channel, because every day we decode one more piece of what your baby is trying to tell you. And remember, your baby cannot speak yet, but they are always, always communicating, and you are exactly who they are communicating with.